I have mentioned this in the last couple of days, but I'll tell the story again because I have my favorite doctor, Dr. Peter Chin Hong, waiting in the wings. After 3 years of being COVID street smart, which is the advice given to me by Dr. Peter Chin Hong on KGO, COVID has finally hit our house. My 14-year-old daughter came home with COVID. She was sick Friday and stayed home from school, and it hit her almost out of nowhere. Saturday, we tested her, and she tested positive. Today, just mere moments ago, she tested negative, but she's still in her room because she's coughing a lot. And I read a story that COVID is now surging again, and we have all these holiday gatherings that are about to take place. So I thought it might be a good idea to talk to my favorite doctor, Dr. Peter Chin Hong, UCSF doctor. So let's bring him on the show. Hi, Dr. Peter Chin Hong. How are you?
Hey Ken,
Hi. It's been a
it's
while. How's it going over there?
it's going well. Sorry, my voice is just a little hoarse right now, but
Oh no.
it's not. I'm not sick or anything, but it's just
You
like
don't have COVID?
one of
Yeah.
those. No, no, definitely. But yeah, I mean, who would ever think? We're still talking about all these respiratory viruses. More than 3 years after the fact.
Mm-hmm. Well, we let our guard down, especially sending kids back to school with no masks. My daughter is in the high school band. She's in a room where people are blowing into instruments. And I can only imagine that that is a place that is, if you're going to get it, that might be a place to avoid. I don't know. But it seems to be that this new COVID, is it V.1?
Yeah, so it's HV.1. That's the most common COVID subvariant in the country right now. It's eclipsing the others. And the reason why one gets to the top of the charts, of the COVID charts, is because it's very transmissible. That's what gives them an edge these days. I think COVID isn't as worried in general about making people as sick, although the very old and the very young are definitely at risk, particularly the very old.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really, really transmissible right now.
More transmissible than the last round, the Omicron?
Well, it's still a flavor of Omicron, believe it or not.
Okay.
Omicron has been around for, 2 years now, and it's staying around because, COVID has worked out a way in which it's really efficiently transmitted.
Mm-hmm.
And, we haven't moved on to another Greek letter like pi or rho or sigma, despite all of this time.
It's so frustrating to have it happen now because I feel like we've been so careful and we've been, I don't know if careful is the word or lucky is the word, but a lot of people are finding that, the minute they, I don't know, stop thinking about it is the minute it happens.
But it's not only about what we're doing, Kim, and I think your family's case is a case in point. It is the fact that the variants are evolving to become more and more transmissible. So the
Hmm.
strategies that you used before may not work quite as well. And like you said, it's a combination of that plus letting our guard down a little bit
Yeah.
and not thinking about it.
Yeah. It's a bummer. And I was reading that we have a surge now of this new COVID variant, plus the concerns over RSV and the concerns over the flu could mean that more people get really sick. Can you get all those at once?
You can definitely get all at once. It's not as
Oh,
common, but the more you get together, the worse you do in general. But the difference between this year, which is still a question mark, and say last year, is that last year the viruses took turns. It was RSV that peaked in November, flu peaked in December, and then COVID peaked in January and February. So they kind of, duked it out and took turns. This year, if they all come together or some of them come together, the reason why that is making people nervous is because hospital capacity could be strained if everything happens all at once.
yeah. Are you seeing an uptick yet in hospitalizations, or are we still doing okay?
We're doing okay. The way I think about it right now in the Bay Area is RSV is number one. We started seeing RSV today or yesterday. We've gotten reports that it's more than doubled in the last week in some areas in South County. like Palo Alto and Sunnyvale. Santa Clara has seen that happening for a month or so, this doubling. And San Francisco, it's been oral RSV land for the last few weeks. So that's what's happening right now. Flu is kind of ticking up a little bit earlier than usual. And COVID is in the background. To give you an idea of COVID, we have about 13 people hospitalized with COVID at UCSF now, one, three, three of them in the ICU. And to put that in perspective, when we're kind of low, we're like in, 10 or single digits. In the summer, we are about 40 or 50. And last winter, we were about 100.
Oh,
So it kind
wow.
of gives you an idea of
Yeah.
a reflection of the community.
One of the reasons that I didn't try to get Paxlovid for my daughter when she was tested positive on Saturday is because I read that it's not really effective for children. It's not necessary. That really Paxlovid is for people who are highly at risk. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the way I think most people are thinking about Paxlovid right now, with one caveat. In general, Paxlovid is best, used in an older person
Mm-hmm.
or an immune compromised person, and particularly if they have not been vaccinated or exposed, because that's really the biggest bang for the buck. For everybody else, there are different considerations, but you're right, Kim. For a younger person, say younger than 50, for most people, it's not necessarily something I would run after. But in some people who are like super ill, even if they're younger, definitely if they're immune compromised, and if they're worried about long COVID. So,
Mm-hmm.
we know that Paxlovid can reduce the risk of that.
So I got vaccinated against the flu and COVID a month ago, as did my husband. And then my daughter test positive on Saturday. So far, the rest of us have tested negative. Now, I'm wondering if you think that it's because we've had her quarantine in her room, or if it's because we just are freshly vaccinated, or both.
I think it's both, but
Yeah.
the interesting thing about the vaccine this year, Kim, is that it's a very close match to what's going on with
Uh,
COVID. Last year, when the new booster came out, by the time it came out, it was looking very different to what was circulating. But because the XBBs are so similar, and this, HV1 that you talked about, it's
mhm.
very similar to the formula of the vaccine. What it means in practical terms is that it kind of gives you more of a buffer zone against infection, not just serious disease, than the previous, booster.
Do I need to get her boosted or vaccinated? Oh no, we lost Dr. Peter Chin Hong. There you are. Do I need to get her boosted since she's already had COVID now? Oh, I lost sound. We have no sound from you. Oh no.
Can you hear now?
Yes, now I can. Thank
Okay,
you.
great.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So once you get COVID, you have a grace period of about 3 months,
Okay.
and that's like when your force field is really strong. You don't need to get vaccinated at that point. You can wait until after that 3 month period
Okay.
because your antibodies are like super high.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'd recommend for your daughter.
Um, Not to make it all about me, but I was reading that when you get the flu vaccine and the COVID vaccine at the same time, it can have extra benefits. So that maybe the old thought of, well, let's get this one and then wait until your immune system dies down and then get the next one, that maybe getting those two together can actually have a positive effect.
Well, it certainly is better for people for convenience, and it's certainly not dangerous. And we've had, you know, hundreds of thousands of people get it already together last year and this year again. In terms of benefit, I think it's kind of mixed in terms of it giving you more benefit than getting it individually. But I think overall, it's a good idea to, for people who haven't gotten it yet to get them all at the same time. I think if people who are eligible for RSV, you can certainly add that into the three to get three at the same time. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people are just doing the RSV a little separately because it is, a newer vaccine this year.
When you were talking about the COVID vaccine, you said it's a close match, and that's great. Sometimes with the flu vaccine, They don't pick the right one. This year, does it look like they picked the right one for flu as well?
Yes, it looks like the flu is
Oh,
also a good match as well.
okay.
So unlike the COVID shot, which just has one type, the flu shot, depending on the type that you got, either has three types or four types. And the one that's circulating right now is included in the suite of types that you would have gotten in the regular flu shot. So again, a good prediction so far. Things may change in the rest of the season, but I think so far so good for the match.
Phew, that is good. Well, a lot of people are going to be celebrating tomorrow, getting together with friends and family, and the masks are gone, right? We're not doing the masks anymore. And so, because it's kind of cold and a little drizzly outside in some areas, are we at higher risk now that we have this COVID circulating again? And is there any other precautions we can take, or are we back to masks being the only thing?
Yeah, so I think about the ABCs, and my overall comment to people is that, if the more you do, the more you're protected, but it doesn't mean you have to do every single thing.
Hmm.
So the way I think about it is you have a menu of options. So I think about the ABCs. So A is for the air. You
Hmm.
keep the air as pure as possible, and that might mean definitely carrying a mask around. You slap it on. If somebody in the plane is coughing next to you, that's kind of like a no-brainer.
Right.
Or in crowded areas, you think about it carefully. Before the ventilation is turned on the plane, for example. A is also for the air to keep pure for ventilation. So again, moving to closer to window or having it outdoors if you're meeting with risk, people who are vulnerable.
Hmm.
Those are strategies people can take. B is for boosters and vaccines. I know it's Wednesday and tomorrow's Thanksgiving, but it's an opportunity to say it's not too late to get it. Again, many of these things are just emerging right now. It's still a good time to get it, even after Thanksgiving. C is for the children. Don't forget about them because they are really at risk for RSV and COVID, for getting seriously ill, but RSV and influenza in particular. D is for diagnostic tests. The reason why we want to get tested is that some people who are older or immune compromised would want to get early therapy like Paxlovid or Tamiflu for influenza.
Hmm.
And E is for everything else, like washing your hands, staying home when you're ill. I think one pearl is, if somebody has symptoms, we think about protecting ourselves when we wear a mask, but
Yeah.
actually a really good protection is slapping the mask on if you have mild symptoms, like your daughter who's coughing in the
Yeah.
bedroom. She's probably out of the infectious zone if she's negative, but she may have a cold with COVID, or a lot of things are going on now, but wearing that mask, particularly around vulnerable people, might not be a bad thing while the person still has symptoms.
Yeah, she's still coughing a lot, so she's going to spend one more day in her room because she just tested negative today. So we're just going to
Yes.
one more day of just
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
make sure, right? We'll let her out on Thanksgiving and
Yeah.
celebrate. How much should we be concerned about RSV? Because what I know about it is my son had it when he was really little and it was pretty scary. But grown-ups can get this too, and it can really impact your lungs. Is this something to be as concerned about as something? I mean, when my daughter got COVID, I immediately was afraid because of all the stories I've read about COVID and people I've interviewed that have had it, that it's awful, right? In some cases. Is RSV something to be feared as well?
So RSV is an interesting virus because for most people it just seems like a cold, and but in people the very old, say older than 65, particularly the older you are, and the very young, particularly under 2 years, but particularly under 6 months, that cold in a other person may have more serious consequences. And that is probably what happened to your daughter earlier on,
Yeah.
when she was smaller, because the airways are so small. The mucus that's produced can really compromise the airways, and that's why the wheezing comes in. So even in an older, in an adult who gets RSV, I think sort of like the classic symptom is wheezing.
Yeah.
Um, in a younger kid, it will be like they can stop breathing sometimes. It might be, it's thought of as being one of the factors for sudden infant death syndrome
Oh God.
because you lose your reflex to breathe. But, most people figure it out That's why it's really important to not to dismiss something that might seem like a cold
Hmm.
in an adult, because for the very young and the very old, if it's RSV, it may cause more serious disease in the lungs itself, not just stay in the nose and congesting the sinuses.
Does RSV have different strains like the flu and COVID?
It's kind of like a one trick pony, mainly two types, but it's mainly one thing. And that's why the RSV vaccine, for those who are eligible, and it's not everyone, you kind of get a bang for your buck, because so far in the studies, um, when they've tested it in adults anyway, older than 60, it lasted for two whole seasons. So it
Mm,
may be one of those. And part of the reason why is because it's just kind of a simple, unchanging virus. So when you develop antibodies to it, it can, last for a while. So there are three groups that are eligible for RSV vaccines: those who are in 60, those who are under 8 months old, but that vaccine is under short supply, although the feds did say they will release 77,000 extra doses of that to keep up with demand, because there's been more demand than they thought. And then the third group is pregnant persons in the third trimester, which protects that newborn, because all pregnant people now in the third trimester, between like 33, 36 months, they're going to deliver around the RSV season, so that if they get the vaccine, it protects that most vulnerable kid. Because under 6 months old, the reason why many of these kids are at risk for bad flu and RSV is because they can't make their own antibodies. They rely on the mom's antibodies.
right. Um, I wonder if you get one of these diseases, RSV, COVID, flu, and it really impacts your lungs, and you're the kind of person that gets the wheeze or has the trouble breathing, can that do long-term damage to your lungs?
In very, very rare cases, most of the times, if you recover, you're going to do okay. But again, the reason why we talk about vaccines is because we don't know who's going to have a rocky course and who's
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
But there's some people who have long-term damage, but I would say most people generally do okay. I think the thing that people forget is that with any of these illnesses, you don't just get better all of a sudden. Um, a lot of times you have a lingering cough that can last a week, weeks. We talk about something called medium COVID now, which is not long COVID and not just when you're super sick in the beginning. Is
Hmm.
that sort of like fatigue and cough that you might have for like 2 or 3 weeks after. So again, nothing to really want. And that's why we're having this whole conversation.
Cheryl in the chat says, I heard there are a lot of side effects for older folks regarding the vaccine.
Not more than we've heard before. With COVID shots, certainly I'll talk, and flu shots, we've had like decades of experience. So nothing new around that. And RSV, um, I think there have been a few cases of fast heartbeat
Hmm.
in the people who got the vaccine. But because it wasn't clear it was vaccine associated, of course, the FDA has approved it. But again, if people are nervous about RSV, definitely talk to your healthcare provider. For those who are worried about COVID, a really good alternative to an mRNA shot like Pfizer or Moderna is Novavax. Like my father-in-law had like some irregular heartbeat with
Hmm.
one of the mRNA shots, got Novavax, and it's been fine. And Novavax also has a new formulation as well, and so people can get that if they're worried about mRNA
Lori asks, if we've had RSV, are we immune? You said 2 years, right?
from the vaccine.
Oh, the
Most
vaccine.
people who get RSV in the season don't get it again, so that's why the RSV curve is like you kind of go up and then you come down. But you don't get like this lingering thing. Like
Hmm.
flu, the season lasts a while. COVID, we know, comes and goes, comes and goes.
Hmm.
RSV, it kind of goes up and then it comes down because people do get immunity to it. But the immunity may not last for the next season, but the vaccine gives you more immunity if you're older than 60 and have access to it.
Last question. Karen writes, my husband and I both took Paxlovid, felt fine, and then rebounded. Is that common?
Well, it's not. Most people don't rebound. So more than 80% people don't rebound. The latest data is that there is a rebound phenomenon that's milder in some people. I would say less than 20%. But you know, it's still worth the taking it if you're older, and that's what I'd recommend to my mom, to my loved ones, to my patients.
Dr. Peter Chin Hong from UCSF, professor of medicine. You're very fancy, you're very successful, and I have to say, we're very thankful, not only now, today, you answering questions, but all through COVID and how much you helped the Bay Area community and so many people with your information and kind of putting us at ease by giving us the information that we needed to stay safe. You're so valuable and so amazing. And thank you for coming on the Mark Thompson Show.
It's been such a pleasure, Kim. And
Yeah.
I always remember you and your Disneyland story from
Yeah.
before. So I'll never forget that.
The
But
whole time
it's
I
such
was
a
there,
pleasure.
I'm like, Dr. Peter Chin Hong says, stay COVID street smart. We're doing it.
But you did it. And, I think
Yeah.
the bottom line is getting COVID now is much better than getting it earlier on. We have so many more options.
Absolutely. And we know more about it. It's less scary, right? In the middle of this, before the vaccines, before everything else, it was a frightening diagnosis. And now it's like, okay, now I can deal with it, right?
Definitely.
How far we've come in such a short amount of time. Man. Happy Thanksgiving, Dr. Peter Chin Hong. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kim. Happy
Bye.
Thanksgiving. Bye.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell, you'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.